these people realized that, oh my God, I've been mismanaging my attention and energy, and I gotta get beyond my past. I gotta get beyond these emotions. I gotta make some big changes. I gotta break the habit of being myself. I gotta stop being this person. Now, that sounds really good theoretically and philosophically, but change is such a hard thing, right? Because the moment you come back to your senses and you step back into your life and you see that person, or you go to that place, or you're with that experience, so many people are unconsciously reacting in their thoughts and feelings to everything in their environment. So now their environment is controlling how they think and feel. So they realize that in order to change,
got to change the environment.
They got to be greater than their environment, greater than the conditions in the world, greater than the circumstances.
Be mindful of that every time it comes
conscious.
up. To be like, okay, I'm going to think differently.
Right.
I'm not going to react this way.
I'm not going to go back. I'm not going to go back, because the moment you start reacting emotionally, emotions are a record of the past. And if those emotions are driving your thoughts, you're thinking in the past. And if you can't think greater than how you feel, and you believe your thoughts have something to do with your destiny, you're creating more of your past, right? So it turns out that the repetition of thinking and feeling and feeling and thinking, these loops that people get caught in, condition their body to subconsciously become the mind of that emotion. Which means now, their body as their unconscious mind is believing they're living in the same past experience 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. What's the relevance behind that? Well, the latest research on genes says genes don't create disease. It's the environment that signals the gene that creates disease.
The emotional environment or the physical environment?
Your environment, any environmental reaction. But if you're reacting emotionally to your environment the same way, you're signaling the same gene in the same way, and now you're headed for a genetic destiny. So the hormones of stress push the genetic buttons that create disease. If you can turn on the stress response just by thought alone, your thoughts could make you sick. And if your thoughts can make you sick, is it possible that your thoughts can make you well? So they began to realize that, oh my God, the repetition of thinking and feeling and feeling and thinking caused me to feel guilt, and I don't even know it's guilt, it just feels like me. It's just, I'm used to this same chemical continuity. Now, the moment they decided to change, anytime you decide to change and change anything about yourself, get ready, because it's going to feel uncomfortable.
It's going to hurt.
You're going to leave the known.
Yeah.
You're going to leave the familiar, and you're going to step into the unknown.
Even if the familiar is uncomfortable and painful,
right?
It's still going to be painful leaving the pain.
Right, because some people are super happy being unhappy.
Right.
So then they would rather cling to their suffering than take a chance on possibility. So these people said, I really have nothing to lose, right? So then they said, I'm willing to be uncomfortable and be in the unknown. And it turns out that's the perfect place to create from. So when the body is conditioned to become the mind, then to change is to be greater than the body, right? Because,
how do we become greater than the body?
Well, that's a whole nother conversation. But let me finish this, okay? So the third thing they said was, okay, so now that I know that I got to break the habit of being myself, and I can't mismanage my thoughts and feelings, I got to change how I act, I got to watch how I speak, I got to become conscious of how unconscious I am, because 95% of who we are by the time we're 35 years old is a set of memorized behaviors, like a computer program, emotional reactions, unconscious beliefs and perceptions. So the first step to change is to become conscious of how you think, to notice how you act, to pay attention to how you feel. And the act of observing those states of mind and body separates you from that program. Now you're the consciousness observing that program. It turns out the more conscious you become of how unconscious you are, lighting a match in a dark place, that first step creates enormous amounts of chaos in the brain and body. And it's disturbing, so people just go back to the same addiction, the same emotion, the same problem. This feels better. No, that feels familiar. So they said, okay, now I got to change. I got to reinvent myself. Now this is really important, because they started sitting down and thinking, okay, who in history do I admire? Who are great people, role models that I can follow? What are the qualities and characteristics that they have? How am I going to change? These are what we call frontal lobe questions. The creative center of the brain switches on, and the emotional center settles down. So then they started thinking, how would I have to be in a new life if I was really going to heal? What would I have to change about myself? Now, there's this interesting phenomenon that if you close your eyes and you begin to think about doing something, you're an athlete, you understand this. If you're a background in football and you were running a pattern or you were doing something, you would rehearse it in your mind. Turns out, that the act of mentally rehearsing something when you're truly present, your brain does not know the difference between what's going on out there and what's going on in here. In fact, your brain will begin to look like you've been doing it for the last 5 days and you've never run the course. So now your brain is no longer a record of the past, because typically it is. Now it's a map to the future. So now you're priming your brain.